You're listening to 3, the podcast. Hello and welcome to 3, a podcast where 3 filmmakers get together to discuss movies.
Join us as we dive in to figure out how these movies work and what they can teach us about the art of filmmaking.
Whether you are a filmmaker yourself or you just love to nerd out on the art of cinema, we invite you to take this journey with us. This is a film discussion by filmmakers.
Today we're discussing the movie Honey Boy, directed by Alma Har'el and written by Shia LaBeouf, starring Shia LaBeouf, Lucas Hedges, and Noah Jupe. Please be sure that you watch the movie before listening any further because this is sure to be full of spoilers. Now, let's get into it on 3. I think this is going to be a really interesting podcast because, I think that we're used to discussing and critiquing movies after a movie theater, after we go see it with our friends. But now we're going to use it to talk about filmmaking. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting ride, this podcast. But I'm excited just because all of us have been kind of working in the industry for a while. And now we get a chance to kind of bring our skill and some of our experience to you guys. You guys want to introduce yourselves? Caleb, how about you?
I'm Caleb Ford. I am a aspiring and currently a director of photography, but I've also been directing some of my own short films and working on commercials, one feature, and then other narrative stuff. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
I'm William Somro. I'm a director of photography working in South Florida, working on mostly commercials, but narrative is where my heart's at. So I'm excited to discuss movies with you guys and kind of learn the craft through watching and discussing.
And I'm Jason Solari. I'm a director and a producer. I have been kind of making narrative features and executive producing documentaries for the last 10 to 15 years. One of my favorite things is collaboration and learning from other filmmakers. And so really cool that we got to get together to be able to do this. So we all met in Australia. We kind of came together as crew when we were working on a feature film together. We ended up living in the same house and just kind of sparring creatively and learning from each other and throwing around story ideas and hopes and dreams for the future. And I think that the three of us kind of gained like a really healthy respect for one another as filmmakers, and also just the way that we view films. We don't always agree on stuff, but we do love to talk about it, and we have fun doing it too. So I don't think sometimes people can't handle the conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like some people really struggle to have like dialogue where there might be a little bit of tension or a little bit of disagreement. But I always like disagreeing with you guys. So
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love it. You got Caleb and his spicy attitude. Dude, it's the best. Your sarcasm, your witty remarks. You've got William, who will see absolutely the best and most positive in everything, but he also knows how to throw some shade sometimes.
Yeah, it's a strength and it's a weakness.
So I think this is going to be super interesting to just start this conversation off with our first movie.
Who picked this movie?
I picked this movie, and I picked Honey Boy. Honey Boy kind of came about when William and I were kind of talking about it. And I go through the season where I don't watch a whole lot of movies. And so this has actually been a really good exercise for me to start watching movies again. But Shia LaBeouf is so interesting. I think when you were in Australia, Caleb, you started talking about Shia LaBeouf a lot. You kind of grew up on him, didn't you?
No, that's not me, man.
No? You were a fan, though, right?
No. I've never in my entire life considered myself a fan of Shia LaBeouf. Not like I don't dislike him, but like I've paid him zero attention.
Interesting.
I don't know who you're talking about, but they sound awesome. Yeah.
I just remember you talking about like Shia LaBeouf movies all the time.
Like what would be a movie like, I don't know, Transformers? I'm not trying to think.
I don't even know because I'm the same way. I wasn't a huge fan of Shia LaBeouf. But William was talking to me about this movie and I was like, all right, now I really got to go see it. So So that's the movie we picked anyways. Caleb's favorite actor.
I
And,
don't dislike Shia LaBeouf. I'm not saying I dislike Shia LaBeouf.
hey,
I just have
dude,
I've
if you
I
if
run
you
my
hate
mouth about
Shia
stuff.
LaBeouf, it's fine.
I hate him more after this movie. Let's put it that
I mean,
way.
I think that we're gonna talk about Shia LaBeouf a lot in this episode.
Yeah, I
So
think so too.
whether you like him or hate him, I mean, it's coming.
It's coming. So, Honey Boy is from a screenplay by Shia LaBeouf. It's based on his own experiences. Award-winning filmmaker Alma Har'el brings to life young actor's stormy childhood and early adult years as he struggles to reconcile with his father through cinema and dreams. By the way, this is right off of IMDb, so
It's the way to do it.
Old
yeah,
faithful.
fictionalizing his childhood's ascent to stardom and subsequent adult crash landing into rehab and recovery. Harrell's cast Noah Jupe, Lucas Hedges, and Otis Lort navigating different stages of a frenetic career. LaBeouf takes on the daring and therapeutic challenge of playing a version of his own father, an ex-rodeo clown and felon. Artist and musician FKA Twigs makes her feature film debut playing neighbor and kindred spirit to the young Otis in their Garden Court motel room. Harrell's feature narrative debut is one-of-a-kind collaboration between filmmaker and subject, exploring art as a medicine and imagination as hope. So that's just kind of a brief synopsis of what the story is about. But so Shia LaBeouf wrote a movie about his upbringing with his father and then even played his father in the movie.
Very interesting.
What'd you guys think of the movie? What were your impressions?
I really, really like this movie. I think it's a movie that you get done and you're like, that was really good and I got a lot from it, but I don't want to go back and rewatch it and go through the pain of watching it again because of the emotional roller coaster that it is. But I thought it was really well done. I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars, but I think because of the importance of it.
Okay.
All right. I would probably. Oh man, this movie's hard for me because I think the subject matter for me hits home. You put a movie about family conflict or family issues, and I'm all about it. I have never been a fan of Shia LaBeouf. I didn't grow up watching Shia LaBeouf, so for me,
Apparently, I did.
I think for me, I really didn't want to like the movie, and I'll be honest, I was able to hold that bias about like halfway through the movie, and then somewhere along the line, it just kind of cracked it. Anytime you're talking about a kid and their dad and their daddy issues, like my heart just kind of starts to bleed. So I ended up really liking the movie in the end. I didn't enjoy the first half, but it's kind of like the second half that really started to hit me. So I would probably give this, 4 out of 5 for me. And enjoyed it in the end.
Okay. I didn't like the movie that much.
Can I say that I started out on a 2 out of 5 scale?
Yeah.
I think that's where I
fair.
started.
That's very fair.
Okay. All right, back over to you, Caleb.
Yeah, I actually watched this movie twice before talking about it, and I just don't think I like it. I think there's some problems with it that like bothered me, and they bothered me like once I left the movie, and it just left me with like it felt flaccid to me. It just felt like it just didn't. It felt like my opinion with it was it tried to have too many storylines, and it just didn't go deep enough in any of them for me. And then there was also
wouldn't that be like inflated instead of flaccid?
As a result, it didn't go hard enough in any direction.
It left you.
You dig?
What a great description of a flaccid story.
Yeah, I think that there was, at the end I kind of felt like, it just felt lots of tropes, and it felt, I don't know, it just didn't feel like subtle, and I just wish there's parts of it that I loved so much more than other parts, like the rehab part where he's grown up, Lucas Hedges. Those scenes to me, I just wanted so much more context and so much more what he was going through.
Yeah.
And the movie gave me just basically used rehab as a diving board just to cue flashbacks. When I just think that rehab could have been such a powerful, like that dude can act so well, and he was selling Shia LaBeouf. So like he became a new character. I just wish there was more of that rehab, or commit to just more of him as a child, or more of the behind the scenes. I just kind of felt like it was all these like strings slowly coming together, and then they just went to montage mode and wrapped it up at 1 hour and 30 minutes. And it just left me being like, ugh. I also went in because a friend who I really admire like loved this movie. It's like one of his favorite movies of the year. So I went in like being like, oh, okay, great. Let's see what this is. And I left. I wanted to like it, and I left being like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'd probably give it maybe 2.5, 3 out of 5.
That's interesting. I probably, now hearing you say that, I think that you're right. One of my notes, at least, or the negatives against the movie, were that it was written by Shia LaBeouf about his experience as Shia LaBeouf. And I think that that always is a bit dangerous because I think that you become a little bit too attached to it. And like you said, I feel like the rehab section where Otis was in rehab in the movie, it was just something to throw back to these flashbacks where Shia LaBeouf was acting as his father. You know what I mean? And I think that you're right. I think that it probably could have been a much more powerful film if they would have like kept in the rehab world or the real world when you're talking script terms, and kind of explored more with like the older Otis as a 20 something or 30 something guy. I think that you could have gone a lot deeper with that. Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen the movie Paris, Texas?
No.
It's unreal. But at the very end of it, there's basically a long scene where there's all this mystery and you're trying to figure out why the character is where they are. I don't want to spoil it because I actually want you guys to watch it. But he starts describing all these memories just over the phone. And it's just like a long dialogue scene.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was so impacting because like reading a book, I could place his memories in my memories. And I just think that if this movie didn't even have the flashbacks at all, didn't have Shia LaBeouf at all, just stayed in, you know, current in rehab, him going through it, and even describing a relationship with his father, maybe having a little bit less flashbacks, I just think it would have been a lot stronger. But then it feels like Shia LaBeouf needed to be in it because it's, and in the same way, I don't want to like shit on it because it's like, okay, yeah, he's going through what he's going through, and yeah, it's brave and all that, but it's also like just felt unnecessary and just I think took away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I gotta agree with you on some level too. It did feel like really flat, and I think even like my 4 stars, I think that's a high rating, but I think most of that comes from the story and the meaningfulness of it more than anything. I think a lot of people who have had experiences like Shia LaBeouf will get a lot from this movie, you know, and I think it'll be therapy for them in watching
right.
it.
And so for my opinion would be that the content is important. Like, you know, what like having tons of people had fathers like that, and there's aspects of him that is kind of like my father, and that dysfunction, and it's important, it's powerful. I just think that like if it wasn't peeling back the curtain of a celebrity, it would be really, really lame. And I think there's a part of the viewer who's like, whoa, that's like Shia LaBeouf, and like that's what his dad was like. And if you pull that away of like you pull Shia LaBeouf out of it, it just felt super loaded with tons of tropes and just felt lame. But because it's like Shia LaBeouf and it's like this like brave stance, it's kind of like you got to go easier on it. But I just wish he took all that anger and that frustration and that hurt and even just wrote a story, like committed to a different story about those topics. I think for his first writing his first movie, he didn't direct it, which is good, but he could have done something with his pain and his hurt that would have been way more powerful than that. I also read an interview that with the dad, and the dad saying that he wishes people could see the first script because he thinks Hollywood got a hold of it and, you know, chilled it out, which is probably super true as well. It just wasn't like the dad wasn't enough of a dick. Like he didn't, like he kind of had this relationship with the sex worker, or I don't know what the right term is for like not a prostitute, but I think it's a sex worker. And they kind of like just had like a snuggle, and then it just I wanted so much more from there was nothing wrong with it. Like it looked amazing. It was all good, but it just left me wanting big time.
After watching it, I was like, okay, this is like a healing therapy piece or whatever for Shia LaBeouf. And okay, so he makes this movie, and I was like, I wonder if this will spark like a wave of filmmakers who do the same. That was kind of where my thoughts went at first. But then I was like, wait, aren't all movies a form of therapy in some way or another for the filmmaker? So actually, even like Jason, I wanted to ask you about your experiences because you've directed a couple of feature films. Like, did you find some healing or therapy elements in those processes?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, well, first of all, not only am I a director, but I teach film. So I've read hundreds, if not thousands of scripts short film scripts, and if you don't think that people put part of themselves in what they're writing,
For sure.
then you're kidding yourself, you know? And
Yeah.
so there's definitely elements of that. But I think, at least what I teach and from my experience, is you got to draw from your own experience. However, it shouldn't be you, because you become so attached that you can't see it objectively. And I think that there were some moments that kind of got a little tropey and got a little really focused on Shia LaBeouf as his father, you know, like
Yeah.
it's hard to explain, but I just think that maybe having a pass of the script with another set of eyes of someone who has lived those experiences would probably be, or at least be cause for a good discussion about where the movie should go. Because I think that, yeah, if you're writing something about yourself and it is exactly your story, sometimes you portray things that are felt but not necessarily true. The context of how conversations go, for instance, you know, sometimes you feel really hurt by a friend or a partner, but they're not trying to hurt you. They just said something that maybe sparked a nerve with your sensitivity, you know? And so the same way, when there's a writer who's writing something about themselves, sometimes what they're writing is things that they felt, not something that was always necessarily true. So I'm not contesting any of the validity of what Shia LaBeouf wrote, but that's what I was saying. I think it's healthy to have another character, another person kind of coming in and maybe editing or questioning,
like-
you
Yeah.
know?
Even like just the choice. Okay, it's brave that he played his dad, but I would say objectively that was a bad choice. He did not even look old enough. It just like why did it have to be him beyond an expression of him? It just feels so vain that, like, yeah, he did get in the way because he doesn't even look old enough to play the character he's playing. So I feel like everyone in the room, everyone on set, I think everyone watching, you kind of feel, you know, when people make short films and they want to make, they're like 19, they're 20, they make a detective
Yeah.
movie, and then everyone's their age in the movie, and you're just like, what? Like, these characters are too young. They're like a counselor who had to have 10 years of school, but they're like,
That's so
they're like
true.
fucking 19 years old, and you're like, that's what he felt like being his dad. It felt like making a short film, being like, ah, damn, we couldn't get an older actor, like everyone was working, so fine, I'll do it. But I know that's not the process, but I could not get over it. He looked hilarious. He looked ridiculous.
I have to kind of disagree though with the choice of him playing his dad, because I think that was the point. I think my conflicts more lie on whether that's right or not, but I do think for him, and if this was the purpose of why he made this movie, being to reconcile that relationship with his dad, I mean, I feel like therapy is all about going back to relive those traumatic experiences over and over, right? So he's like literally doing that, which I feel like there's something intriguing about that to me. In the end, the message is meaningful, so I feel like he pulls something off here. Yeah, maybe it feels a little flat, where it needs something more, maybe more polishing or something, but I gotta say, I like that he chose to play his dad and relive that experience to reconcile that relationship with him.
It is interesting that his dad raised him into an actor, and then it almost fully backfired on the dad, where he then, like, you raise up your kid as an actor and they eventually play you and don't portray you perfectly. It is interesting. I think for me, I'm more just trying to dissect and figure out why it didn't land. And I think if I pull back and go, oh, for Shia LaBeouf, it's great. And I guess, yeah, lots of people got work. I'm just thinking, like, if it's just for him to go through that and work through that, that is fine and that is good. And it is interesting, him playing his dad when his dad raised him to be an actor. I get that idea, but I'm just thinking, if you think about critiquing why it's not going to have the impact he thought it would have, or maybe he didn't even give a shit and he just wanted to make this movie. And there's part of me that goes like, kudos to you. You just, like, you played someone that you weren't, and it's brave, and it is a cool exercise, and it is worth talking about. Like, did it work?
Yeah, that's where I have conflict, because are we supposed to be making films for ourselves, or are we supposed to be making films for other people?
Well, I think that it's probably more about, are we supposed to be telling good stories? And I think this was a good story. Whether it was executed perfectly, the decisions that are made. Listen, as far as Shia LaBeouf as an actor, I definitely think he takes risks. But to me, Shia LaBeouf plays Shia LaBeouf in every movie.
That's yeah.
Um,
Which is funny
but
because
it worked. It worked in this movie
exactly
because
this
it was
movie more than
about his
ever.
family.
Yeah.
But all the other movies, I think he acts the exact same. He kind of talks like this. That's my worst Shia LaBeouf impersonation.
No, dude, that's
but he
actually
always
really
talks,
good, man. That was a really good
Yeah.
impression.
He kind of speaks heavily. Yeah.
No,
Hey,
asshole.
Lucas Hedges killed it.
yeah, Lucas Hedges was unreal. Like he was so subtly Shia LaBeouf. It was like I would. Oh, when it started, even
Yes.
it was like cool, and the music was popping, and it was like this world, and like peeling back the curtain of whatever a Transformers set, and he's in rehab. And it's this beautiful location, and there's this side character, and then we just didn't get into anything. I think what you're saying,
Yeah.
Will, is interesting. Like, yeah, when we make films, are they for? They're not obviously just for us, but I think that when people try and make a film just trying to make it for everyone else, it doesn't work. So you have to kind of trick yourself and say, okay, you know what, for this time, it's for me. I think that's kind of what you're saying, Jason, is like the writing process feels like be fully selfish, be fully like, don't worry, it's just for you at that point, and then bring some voices in the room,
Right.
and then maybe you can tweak certain things that would take it from being just for you and maybe make the impact for everyone.
Right.
And I think that when he's so connected and it's celebrity and it's kind of a new idea, it's novel that he's playing his dad, I just wonder if it was, a bunch of people in the room saying yes when a couple people should have said, hold up, like, why are you playing your dad? It's interesting.
Yeah.
But I just think that, like, if the goal is for him to have therapy, and I already said this, it's great. It's interesting as an artist that our art can do that. But if the goal was to, like, really uncover a relationship between him and his dad and how other people relate to that, yeah, I don't know. But I guess lots of people would watch this and they would surpass all the critiques I'm making because it's so similar to their life experience that it wouldn't matter. Like they would immediately implant their family into the movie.
Right.
So that all gets stripped away. I'm just trying to figure out why I didn't
I don't
like
think
it.
Shia LaBeouf had a bad performance. I don't think that he had the right performance. I'll be honest with you. All right, moving a little farther into the movie. I know we haven't even started from the beginning, but that's all right. Moving a little farther into the movie, when Shia LaBeouf's father's name is James, who Shia LaBeouf plays in the movie. So James, he goes to like an AA meeting for the first time and talks about the disconnect of who he wants to be as a father and who he is, and how much his son annoys him but how much he loves him. That was like the first time I was like, okay, this character is like kind of hitting the mark for me. And it brought a whole lot into context because the whole thing that annoyed me was this dad is just a jokester. Like he's just he's a teenager who's balding. You know what I mean? Like that's just how I saw him. But maybe that's what Shia LaBeouf's father was actually like. Maybe that's what James in real life is like, The only thing I'm saying is I think I really started to at least like his performance probably most once he kind of got a little bit more serious and went to AA. Every other time I was still seeing Shia LaBeouf, unfortunately.
And those scenes were so good, and I think that there wasn't enough room to let them play out how they should have. That scene is really good because it's just performance. It was a good performance. Another scene that I really liked was when Otis's mom calls on the phone in the hotel room, and the dad and the mom aren't obviously speaking because they're having a rocky divorce, and he starts acting like his dad. That scene was the best scene in the whole movie to me, like by far, because it was just like it summed up the whole concept perfectly of an acting kid stuck between two parents communicating for them. I don't know, that scene did give me goosebumps. And
Did you get emotional?
Like the most I did in the movie, I was like, whoa, it felt like that had to have happened or something similar because it was too unique. Sometimes in movies when it's like, okay, like, yeah, my dad was like a chicken performer and that was true, but I could be like, well, I could come up with something like that. That scene was pulled from some memory. And if there was just more moments like that,
yeah,
it was
I
like
think
it
they
came
could have
from
had
a
more
deeper place.
Yeah, it was just that scene was killer. It was awesome.
Yeah.
That was the scene that made me kind of wake up and pay attention because I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit distracted just because I just didn't think the movie was going to be that good until that scene, and I started paying attention from there on out.
So maybe the movie just needed more scenes like that. Like from the beginning, it should have just been hitting that vein
Yeah.
or whatever. But I would be curious as to how much of this is like literally word for word was said or was like exactly what happened.
I think lots of it wasn't. I read an interview with the dad, and he's saying that there was like a sex worker, even in that plot line, but Shia never slept with a lady in the hotel and those kind of things. And if the dad could just be lying, but I think there was lots of aspects. I think you can almost dissect what was true and what wasn't by what feels so unique. I don't know.
Right.
I think, yeah, like there was just no consequence for anything the dad did in a way, other than he relapsed, I guess. But the Boys and Girls Club, that narrative of him being a shitty father, all that stuff is good. Yeah, I should.
Don't you think that that's kind of no, you're good, but don't you think that that's a little bit the point, because Otis, the character Otis, who's an actor, literally paid his father to do the stuff the father was supposed to provide for his kid. You know what I mean? And I think that you're right. There were no consequences, and that's what was a little bit maddening about it, is because this kid was literally paying the bills. I don't think that they drove that point home well enough, to be quite honest.
No, that is such an interesting dynamic that they didn't.
They mentioned it a few times. Yeah, they should have just driven that home, because Otis is literally paying everything for James. He's paying him to live. He's paying for their place to stay, the car. And he's just a little kid. By the way, I think Noah Jupe, I'm guessing that's how you say his name.
Yeah.
He's amazing. I think that kid is such a good actor. And maybe it is the thing that's highlighting Shia LaBeouf trying to play an older character, because I don't think that he's a bad actor, but I don't think that he was right for this role.
What's interesting about that is I was doing just some reading on Reddit, like what people were saying about this movie, and a lot of people were saying that his performance was Oscar worthy, and they were questioning why this movie didn't get in the Oscars, and I was like, interesting.
I'm questioning it too, because the Oscars often reward like a stunt, and it was a stunt. I think that's like the biggest critique of the Oscars is like, oh, if someone fully becomes, was that a Winston Churchill movie that won a couple years ago? Or what was that movie where it was like the dude's face was fully in makeup, fully differently, fully become a different character? In my opinion, like the Oscar always awards stunts, and this was a stunt. Mm-hmm. So I'm surprised it didn't get more buzz.
Yeah, especially because you go read up on it after, and you're like, oh, he wrote it in therapy and then started shooting 2 weeks after that therapy ended.
Oh, that's crazy.
Well, I like the story. I don't think it resolved anywhere, but I don't think it was necessarily Oscar worthy.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah. It's just your classic. I call them Southern summer stories. Like, it's just like you got like fried green tomatoes, Honey Boy. It's just like a story about living life
American
in the
Pie.
South.
Peanut Butter Falcon.
Yeah.
American Pie 1, 2, and 3.
What? Oh my god.
American Pie Naked Mile. Well, yeah, I think
you have way too much knowledge about American Pie.
I'm like American Pie 1, 2, and 3. That's some good plots. What would you guys pull from it to apply to your crafts? I think that'd be something I'm curious about with you, Bill, being a DP, and you saw certain things, and then you, Jason, directing. What's like some things, regardless if the movie was perfect or not, we watch movies, have to enjoy them and have to glean ideas or glean techniques or approaches for our own stuff, right?
Right, yeah.
So what would you guys take from it?
Well, number one for me would be the cinematography, obviously. I mean, this is the girl who shot Neon Demon, and I just think her work's incredible. But also for the March issue of American Cinematography, she did a little write-up. It was like an interview with her, and she talked a little bit about this film, and it made me respect it a little more. Anyways, just love the style, like that low contrast. The colors were beautiful. A lot of just like sun glare, but not like J.J. Abrams style. Like more this natural, like literally just shooting in the environment, and just you could tell it with that like documentary style that they shot it in. It was just kind of always finding those moments as the scenes played out. That's what it felt like. Mm-hmm. I think if I were to like be going into a project that called for some of those things, like documentary style, more cinematic, but also like those neon colors, she incorporated a lot of those too. I would definitely watch this movie as a reference.
Yeah, totally. And by documentary style, what do you mean? Just that handheld look, or what?
The handheld, but it also felt like they were just kind of bouncing off whatever the performances were. And she kind of confirmed this in the interview that she would just kind of light the space and just be ready for anything and be very non-invasive with the way she shot
Love
it.
it.
So
Love that.
minimal crew in the room. The movie was more about the emotion and the performances, and she saw that, so she worked it out to shoot it in that way. And really, when you think about it, that documentary style of kind of just having the camera handheld and running around, like to capture that, I think it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I love lighting the scene and letting the actors just play. It's the best.
Yeah, and another very interesting thing, which says something about where we are with technology, is she was saying with LED lighting, she would light the space, but she would be outside of the room with it on a DMX board, they call it, where she could have full control on the dimming and color of the lights throughout the scene. So I imagine that a lot of times that looked like, oh, the camera's panning around the room, and she would literally be able to lift up certain lights in the room to maybe make that light land a certain way, maybe change the color, you know, a little bit throughout the scene to match. And I think that's a really cool like idea for where filmmaking's going. Because yeah, with LED
That's really
lighting
cool.
technology, I'm super interested in all that. I love movies when I can read about things like this that feel like, okay, this is where we're heading. In the future, you'll be seeing a lot more of this, where the cinematographer's outside the room on that board controlling everything.
Yeah, that's cool.
Very cool. Yeah, I loved how it looked. Like it kind of, I would describe it as like the Vimeo style.
Yeah,
like
right.
in a movie. Like, you know, if you're watching, you know, staff picked ads that you never actually see on TV, it's totally
Right.
what they look like. That anamorphic, kind of like feels like a Far Side key, pretty simple with some color
Mhm.
on their hair or whatever. Yeah, I like that. There were certain things where a street light was just pink, and so
Right.
their
Yeah,
hair
just
light was
like-
just like pink. And
Yeah.
I know that that doesn't exist. Like street lights don't look like that. But I think
Exactly.
when I see that in movies, it does make me feel free that, you know what, a street light can be pink.
Yeah.
And I like that.
I think
It's
it's
encouraging.
yeah, it just comes down to serving the story, and I
If
really
I want a street light to be pink, it'll be pink.
Yeah, but I do
Yeah,
think
whatever.
that cinematography fit the story really well. And even though, like, you're right, like that one pool scene, literally I think every light source in that scene was some crazy color. It was like the massive lights in the background that were lighting this in the trees were like cyan green, and then the light like on them was all pink. It's like, sweet, okay.
All right.
So
all right.
why would you say that you said this style worked really well for the movie? Could you unpack that a little bit? I think it felt right, but why would you say that? Like, if you were in the meeting and you got the script and said, how are you going to shoot it? You're like, okay, I'm going to shoot a handheld. Why? Why do you think that worked so well for this?
I think because we wouldn't have got the same performances we got. I mean, maybe, but I
Copy,
think
yeah.
that what the cinematographer, her name's Natasha Breyer, by the way, what she said about being uninvasive, I think that really does add to the actors' performances, giving the actors the freedom to move around the space and feel like they're really the only ones there. Maybe that added to the emotion that was captured on the screen.
For sure. Jason, what did you think of, like, anything you pulled for your future films
Yeah.
or your craft?
Well, I would probably agree with both of you guys. Like that look, actually, William and I have been talking a lot about that look and lighting the room so that there's freedom to kind of move around, the documentary style, like following the story rather than planning the story. I really like that, but it definitely is like a budget filmmaker's dream because, you know, you're shooting in a location and just trying to have as much freedom to move around as possible, as quickly as possible, without having to relight for the two shot or the reverse. You know what I mean? And so, like, one of the things, like, I just really don't like as a director is having to wait around for relighting, like, a reverse. You know what I mean? However, that's just kind of been what the norm is, you know, what I've expected. But so I really liked the way that it was shot. One of the first scenes, I was like, oh, I got to call William. I got to say, look at this movie. Like, just look at the colors, look
Yeah.
at how it was shot, because it's kind of something that William and I were talking about just a few weeks ago, that style. So definitely taking that away. I think one of the things I really loved were quiet moments. And whenever they come up in movies, I'm trying to watch them and see what's happening. Like even Otis's character, when he's in the room with the girl from across the way, I guess is what I'll call her. Which she's played by FKA Twigs, or her name in the cast credits is Shy Girl. Anyways, they're at the pool and they're kind of having these moments together. He's just a kid though, and she obviously seems like she's maybe a sex worker, But there's like this like kind of love and respect thing. And when they're in bed together, they're not doing anything, but they're just touching each other's faces, right? And it was this really crazy moment. And first of all, I'm thinking like, man, like this is kind of a little shocking. Like I wonder if this was actually what happened to Shia LaBeouf in his own life story. I was asking that question, but still appreciating the fact that not a lot was going on. And by the way, I love FKA Twigs. I'm not sure if you guys know who she is. She's a dancer. Do you know
She's
her?
dope. Yeah, well, she was in the Apple commercial.
And she's in the Apple commercial, which I love. It's like Spike
Yeah,
Jones.
that's a crazy one.
Yeah, it's a commercial for Apple HomePod called Welcome Home. Yeah, it's cool little video. So when I saw her in the movie, I'm like, what is she doing? I didn't know she was like an actress. So, but I did think that the chemistry between Noah Jupe and FKA Twigs in the movie was actually really good, and there's a lot of these little quiet moments. And going back to Lucas Hedges, I know that everyone's a fan of Lucas Hedges. I like Lucas Hedges. I have not always appreciated the characters that he's played, although I think he plays the hell out of them. But Lucas Hedges, I think, had some really great moments. And even though his voice didn't sound like Shia LaBeouf, he emulated Shia LaBeouf. Like there's
That's
a
what I
couple times
mean,
where he'd like
yeah.
scratch his
Definitely.
neck, or he'd do something that I would remember maybe seeing Shia LaBeouf doing an interview.
Yeah, he just had
So
that energy, that Shia LaBeouf energy.
yeah. So I think one of the things that I take away from this is kind of looking to the quiet moments and then not being afraid to run away from that. There's a scene where Otis, when he's older in rehab, goes out into the woods to scream. And it's kind of juxtaposed with Otis as a kid howling as a kid should, playing around,
Mhm.
you know? And so I think those moments, like opposing the quiet moments, were really great for me. I really appreciated independent filmmaking at its finest, where it's very localized in just a few locations. I did love the look, the feel of it, and the acting, I think, was superb. You know, and I do think Shia LaBeouf's acting was really good, but I don't think that young people should be playing older characters.
Yeah.
Like Shia LaBeouf is what, 30, early 30s, and he's playing someone who is in their 50s. Like, I just don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Caleb, so you asked the question, what would have been your takeaway?
I'm not really sure what my take. I really agree with both of your guys' takeaways. I think that I'm taking it away from you guys taking it away, and that's good to like even with the lighting, like lighting a space, working within like that handheld style, just trusting your gut with some pink lights, some different colors. That stuff always inspires me. But I think it's just a reminder of I'm just finishing up my first short film, like just fully self-funded. I'm just making a short film, and I'm just realizing like my main mistake is becoming so loud of trying to pack too much into it. And so it's just I'm starting to see that in so many movies of short films especially are so hard because it's almost like you can pack nothing into them. But
Yeah.
but even features. So I'm thinking like, okay, if I'm going to write a feature, I'm going to do something like that. This movie is a perfect example of there was flashbacks to me that didn't need to be there, and I just wish they picked one of the story arcs and just ran with that fully rather than just spreading themselves too thin. And I think when you're writing, you want to load it in with like connections and oh, they're in the pool and that, that fires a flashback to when he was in the pool or he's peeing and his dad said he had a small penis and he's peeing in the room. And those things are like really tempting to do when you're writing because you feel like you're brilliant. But I just think that I want to be mindful when I write stuff just to slow it down. I think what I'm more interested in films is when they're just one story,
Mm-hmm.
like what do you call that when it's like linear, like one slice of time, not like this, oh, they're 15, they're 6, it's flashback here, there. I think there's movies that do that so well, but I think when you don't have lots of budget, lots of time, it's really, I think TV shows can do that a lot better than movies.
Yeah.
Like even I just watched a movie called Safe. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that one. It's from the 90s. It's basically about a lady who becomes allergic to all the fumes of the 20th century, 21st century. And she goes to this retreat center and there's the characters she meets and she's trying to like rehabilitate herself. And it was the perfect, if this movie followed the pacing of that movie of just like focused on Lucas Hedges and that character, I just thought it'd be so good. So for me, I think I like when movies don't have flashbacks for a little bit at least. I don't know how to do them right. I'm not sure that's a takeaway or it's just an opinion, but
Nice. What did you guys think of Shia LaBeouf's real dad coming up in the credits?
It reminded me of Lars von Trier whenever he ends his movies about America. And
Oh,
he
yeah,
goes
yeah,
to black
yeah.
and white photos of
America, like,
like Americana type stuff. And in his
yeah.
earlier movies, he'd never been to America. So when those popped up, I almost laughed out loud because I was like, "This dude's trying to be like Lars von Trier real bad." Yeah, it was weird because it was exactly like the character in the movie, like with the John Lennon glasses and the really weird hairstyle, like thinning hair up top and then like long hair down to his shoulders. It was weird to see that because the whole time I'm like, this character's so fake. But then I saw photos of it and I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of get a little bit more about Shia LaBeouf's father.
It made it feel like he was dead.
Yeah.
I don't know, like whenever in movies
Memory
they
of-
don't show a video clip or like a current thing. You're like, oh, guess
Yeah.
they passed away.
I'm curious. You said you saw an interview with him.
I
What
started
did he
reading
think
one
of it?
last-
Like he was stoked about it or what?
The vibe I got was that he knows it's just a script. It's Hollywood. He says not everything in it's true. He didn't talk like that. He doesn't have that accent. But Hollywood wants the drama. But I also think that like he's kind of like a narcissistic character that probably just loved it no matter what. Like if he's truly like what that character is like, he's famous now. Even
Right.
even if he's an anti-hero, he's like still famous.
True.
And if he fully hasn't overcome like the complex of his son having success and him not, I feel like he would just love it. So that's what they even said in this interview was he was so eager to get an interview. They like messaged him on Facebook and he was just down. So
He's like, yes, right away.
and that's
Been waiting
that's
for
pretty
this.
funny. It's pretty charming.
That's interesting. Wow. I might have to start doing like a what my stars are going into the discussion and then what my stars are at the end because I think it got knocked down a star just through talking with you guys. I'm like, but even just thinking about the themes
always
of
a
the
good
movie,
idea.
like the themes of the movie, I'm like, they're really important and meaningful to me, but I don't know, maybe they didn't pull it off as well as you think, like in the moment, when the film's wrapping up.
Can we do that really quick? Like what would be your new star rating?
I would have to say 3.
Ooh.
I won.
I can't believe I've got the high. I'm 3.5 out of 5 stars.
I think I'm sitting like a 2.5 still. I came in
Okay.
packing the little heat of like the frustration with the movie, so I feel like I was kind of starting to change your guys' minds.
Yeah.
You brought up some really good points. Yeah.
If you think about it conceptually of him playing his dad, it is interesting and I admire that. If you're evaluating if it was the best way to communicate the themes and impact the audience, I think there were some bad choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I sit on this movie.
You changed our minds. Don't get a big head about it. But
Well, it's always easier to like. I always find like with movies, I'm feeling even picking the movie for the next time. It's easier to talk shit on movies than it is to say, like, oh, what you love about movies. Always,
until you make a feature film, and then the respect level for every filmmaker goes up like 100.
dude. Even a short film, you just get smoked. Even like I don't like want to like be so opinionated on this podcast, and then someone like goes and checks out my work, and they're like, okay, kid. But it's just like it's kind of like you have these two hats of like when you really think about how hard it is to pull off. You can respect any movie, but as a consumer, I have to like come out of it and be like, what was my gut feeling? And even I watched it with my wife, and she just kind of came out, and she doesn't describe things super in depth or like get into it, but she's kind of like, meh. Basically, was her response to it as well. So someone objectively who's just watching it as a consumer had the same reaction.
Yeah. And that's really important to differentiate because there is like a general audience. As filmmakers, we need to be so aware of them and the role they play in the movies we make and the stuff we put out. At the end of the day, they're the ones funding the whole thing. So
Yeah, I know. Hey.
Even with all the smack talk about Shia LaBeouf, like I think in the end, I think this is a script not a lot of people could write. And I thought the story was interesting. So I still have the respect enough for him. Should he have played the role, or should he have had someone take a pass or an edit at the script? Then I think that was probably would have been a smarter move. But mad respect to him and that story about his father. It would have been a hard story to tell, but I'm glad I watched it. It's not something I'd go back and watch again. But
Isn't it kind of, I don't know, I can't, the irony doesn't escape me of like a person being in rehab and being like, oh, I'm an egomaniac. There was lines like that throughout the thing. And then coming out of rehab and then making a movie where you're like, you write it, you're the star, it's about you, about how you were an egomaniac. It just feels kind of funny, but I guess for like
still
celebrities.
acting as an egomaniac.
Yeah, like, but then you are being an egomaniac by like, this was super egotistical. I feel like this movie, which is fine. I feel like celebrities can be self-aware, but then they're not in the same way because it's just their lives are so inflated that even when they are being like humble, they're still not humble like the average person is.
Yeah.
Because their lives are so larger than life. So he probably did go through some shit in rehab, but it just feels like an ironic way to like blow your bluff.
You're still self-centered. It's
it's kind of like,
the takeaway.
Okay. The takeaway is that
Yeah.
I mean, and that's like me just being a full-on, like forgetting that's a human and he's trying to work through his stuff. But it just seems like if I was a stand-up comedian, like you could eat this shit up, you know?
Just getting a glimpse into his life, do you think it explains some of his behavior in the past, I guess, throughout his career, really?
I think it explains it. It doesn't excuse it. Like, I mean, there were so many times where it seemed like Otis was trying to say in the movie to the psychiatrist or the counselor or whatever, I've been doing this my whole life. Like, he's yelling at her, like, I've been acting my whole life. You think you know everything? Like, I don't even know what he was saying, but he was like trying to say, like, do you know what I've accomplished in my life? And it still felt like Shia LaBeouf still being kind of like super prideful. Yeah. Like, I am this badass. He's done some crazy things. He's gotten arrested.
He wore a paper bag over his head and as like an art piece and like sat in a room. In this art museum, people could walk through the room and he was just there on the chair with the bag on his head. He watched every single thing he's ever been in chronological order in a movie theater, and anybody could go. It was like in New York City. Anybody could just go up and like join him and watch.
Is that where that crying meme is from? Like of him like crying or laughing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm more like fascinated with him. I don't hate him, but you're right. It didn't excuse that behavior. I think that first shot kind of explains everything. The first shot of him as an adult, like he's literally jerked back in the frame and then brought back forward into the front. And then when he's a kid, the same thing happens. And I feel like what they were trying to say is this kid's just been jerked around by Hollywood his whole life. You know, he's never had a say. And that's like what's made him who he is today.
Maybe we should talk about what is our next movie.
Yeah. What's next? Caleb, you're up.
Next week's movie is The Square by Ruben Östlund.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. I'm excited.
I am too.
So, watch the movie. Tune in next week and join us for our next discussion
of 3 podcasts.
3 podcasts.
3. Yeah. 3 podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on 3 the Podcast. Make sure you subscribe and join us next week for another film discussion hosted by Jason Solari, William Somero, and Caleb Ford.